Hi everyone. So in this unit, we're going to go ahead and work on some job materials. And I've learned in the past that some students don't like this unit because they feel they already have materials. However, other students really like this unit and need this unit. I've also learned that some of the people who have materials could definitely improve those materials. So we're going to go ahead and spend some time going over how to come up with the materials you might need on the job market. However, these are the same skills you would need in many cases to apply for internships and even sometimes scholarships. So it's a really useful skill to help you develop your professional brand and get a job once you finish your degree. A couple of big concepts I want to go over in this video. The first one is breaking this misconception that a lot of students have that when you apply for a job fresh out of college, you're mostly competing with other people fresh out of college. And they have this mentality like, oh, well, I'm smarter than most of my classmates, so I'll probably do fine. But you are not competing against people who have the same amount of experience as you. Often you are competing against people who have more experience than you. An entry-level position might have people applying for it that are finishing their degree and have zero work experience, or people who have been working for 3, 4, 5 years in the field might also apply for an entry-level position. And so you may be competing against someone who has 5 years of work experience in your field after their degree. So the job market is highly competitive. It absolutely is a competition. When we're applying for a job and I'm on a job committee, we might get 200, 300 applications for a job that we only need one person to do. How do you get from 300 resumes to one person you're hiring? Well, you start eliminating people for all kinds of tiny things because you got to get from 300 to 1, and it is a competition. And it is really important that you spend a lot of time crafting your materials. If you feel that writing a resume is very easy, then you probably have not written a very good one. Okay? It takes a lot of time and energy to write good job materials. Okay? So the other major misconception that I would like to talk about is this idea that you are going to apply for jobs because you want certain kinds of experience, or internships because you want certain kinds of experience, and that those jobs want people who want experience. So I've seen students write in their job materials things like, I want a job with Apple because this will be a really great internship for me. Right? Apple, it does not want people who only think about what is good for their career. Apple wants to know what you could give them. If you're in a pile of 300 other applications, they're going to pick the person who's going to bring the most to them. Okay? So in your job materials, you need to always talk about what you can provide to anyone who hires you, not what they can provide to you as an employee, like status, experience, whatever. You're going to have to focus on what you have. What skills do you have? What classes have you taken? What degree do you have? What job experience do you have? Right? On day one of the job, what will you already know how to do? Okay? And those are the kinds of things we talk about in our job materials. Okay? The third thing that I want to talk about is something your book talks about briefly, which is building a brand, okay? And this is the same concept. If you think about job market as you telling the company, Google, or, your local state government, or whoever you're applying to, what you can provide with them, you need to start thinking about what that package looks like and what that package is, which is your brand. And you should already be building that brand now. So I have a lot of students who, for example, are studying engineering and have only worked at Publix their entire lives. And I have nothing against Publix. I like Publix. But when you go to apply for a job and somebody else has managed to have a job on a construction site, or an internship with a local or engineering firm, they have a brand that you do not have, right? The intern who has construction experience and interned with an engineering firm versus the engineer who has only ever worked at Publix. And that is something that is basically going to make you look not as competitive. Similarly, I have students a lot of times who are like maybe studying public health, but they've spent their entire lives working at a law firm. And when I look at your resume, if you didn't tell me what kind of job you were applying for, and I see law firm, law firm, law firm, I think, wow, this person wants to work in a law firm because their professional brand looks like someone who works in a law firm. And you have a lot of skills related to law firms. And how many skills do you have related to public health? Okay. Now, some of that is branding in terms of building good experiences. And while you're in college, you need to try to start building those good experiences to build your brand. The second part of it is how the person shaped their professional brand. Okay, so if you have lots of law firm experience, then you need to be really careful about how you represent that on your resume to make it look transferable to working in something related to public health. So your public brand is two things. Your public brand is, in one sense, the actual skills and experience you have. And the other thing that is your professional brand, sorry, I'm tongue-tied, is how you package that, right? So on one hand, you can't pretend you have engineering experience that you do not have. On the other hand, maybe you do have some transferable skills that you learned in other places, like construction sites, and if you package that well, it will help convince people that you would work well in an engineering environment. So you need to think very carefully about what experiences you are gaining, and you need to think very carefully about how you are packaging those experiences to convince someone that you are the kind of person who would work well in whatever job you're applying to. The other misconception that a lot of students have is that you build one resume or one cover letter and you send it out to tons of jobs, and that is absolutely not the case. You write a resume, but you have to shift and change things for each of the jobs, because if you're really building your professional brand and you're really trying to shape yourself to apply for a specific job, obviously each job is different, and if you're not remolding and reshaping as you're applying to different jobs, then you're not really competing. So for example, I might build a resume and then I apply for a job that so one thing about your resume is most important stuff usually goes towards the top, right? And so maybe I build a resume and then I apply to a job like FIU that has a lot of multilingual students, a lot of international students, and buried at the bottom of my resume is that I am trilingual and I grew up in South Florida and whatever. So I would copy and paste and move that way to the top so FIU sees that I'm trilingual and I grew up in South Florida, and then I save that as a new version of my resume and I send it out. Maybe for another job, they asked me to prove I had a certain kind of experience that wasn't relevant to all the other jobs I was applying for, but now I delete something and I add that new experience in and send it off to that job. So you're not writing completely new resumes, but you are shifting and shaping your resume as you apply for different jobs in order to manage your professional brand, okay? Now, the other thing, when you apply for a job, you need to apply for jobs for which you are actually qualified. And there are basically two types of people. There are people who apply for jobs that they are not qualified for at all and then seem completely surprised when they don't get the job. But if, let's say there's a list of 10 things you need for this job, if you've got one of them, what do you think the chances are that in that pile of 100 applicants, somebody has more than one thing on the list, right? So you're competing against people who are definitely going to beat you. So that's not a very fun game to play. Then the other kind of person is the person who takes themselves out of the running. They're like, oh, they want 10 things, I only have 9. I guess I won't apply. Well, don't do that either. So I always tell students, don't apply for a job unless you have at least 50% of the qualifications. But if you have 50% of the things on that list and you want to give it a shot, give it a shot. Don't take yourself out of the running if you have 90% of what they want, but not 100. Try. Because maybe nobody else who applied had 100 either, right? And then it's a question of which person who only has 90% do they want. So you want to make sure that you're applying for jobs that you are qualified for and don't waste your time. Now, the job market can be very frustrating, and sometimes it takes a lot of time and effort, keyword time, to apply, and you might be waiting weeks or months with no reply for jobs. When that happens, sometimes students get really desperate and they start applying to more and more and more kinds of jobs that are further and further and further away from their professional brand. You should not do that. Instead of spending 2 hours applying for jobs that you are not qualified for and are not what you want to do, take those 2 hours instead to do more research to find more jobs to apply for that you are qualified for, because jobs can be posted in one place but not another. So if you're on monster.com or careers.com and you don't see any more jobs to apply to, start going to company websites. Oh, well, is Apple hiring? Is Google hiring? Is my local county hiring? Is the city hiring? They will list jobs on their own sites too. You can use social media. You can use LinkedIn. You can find all kinds of sources. So instead of spending that energy applying for jobs that you're not qualified for and are nowhere near what you have branded yourself as, use that energy to find more jobs to apply for. Okay? And then importantly, you can also use that time to network, and networking is totally acceptable and fine, which is why social media has become more and more important for job searching. First of all, a lot of companies will post jobs on their social media, like their Twitter. They'll say, hey, we're hiring, follow this link to apply. But also you want to network. If you know someone who is working in the field you want to work on, it is totally acceptable to reach out to them and say like, hey, is your company hiring? And can you put in a good word? And here's where your professional brand is important again, because if they don't like you, they're not going to put in a good word for you. So you need to have really built a reputation of someone who is nice, friendly, fun to work with, and they will help put in a word for you. For example, whenever FIU is hiring, if I know people who are trying to apply for those jobs, they absolutely do reach out to me and say, hey, FIU is hiring, I want to apply for this job, can you put in a word for me? Some companies even have a formal system for this. Like my husband has worked places where he has to go into like a computer system and officially put in a good word for this person who's applying, and it shows up like in their computer system. So you absolutely can network, and that is useful to do, okay? The last thing that I'll go over really is that when you're thinking about your professional brand and when you're thinking about how you are going to market yourself to people, you need to use, first of all, examples. Don't use empty words. So we're not going to say, I'm hardworking, and then move on. You need to give us evidence that you're hardworking. So instead of saying I'm hardworking, maybe say, I worked 2 jobs while going to school full time and also helped care for my little brother. And then I will decide, as someone who's looking over your resume, wow, this person is hardworking. That evidence goes a lot further than empty words. Don't say that you're professional. Let me see that you're professional by what your materials look like. You can say that I'm reliable and responsible, but you would be better off giving me an example that proves you're reliable and responsible. You say you have a lot of experience working with computers. That doesn't help me. Tell me what kinds of experience you have with computers. Now, importantly, that evidence does not have to come from formal job training. In other words, let's say you're good at computers, but you taught yourself. That's useful. It doesn't have to have come from a job. You need to find a way to work it into your resume. Let's say that you're really responsible, and that's shown by your personal life. You can definitely mention some of that stuff. Also, you can talk about things like coursework you did. Like maybe you're applying for a job and you say, man, I have never worked in a job where I did that, but I did take an entire class on this. You can say that on your resume, I took an entire class on this, okay? But real useful examples that come from all over your life are much more useful than empty phrases. Okay? And the other thing related to your professional brand is that you do need to seem friendly. Okay, when people want to hire you, they do not want to hire a jerk. They do not want to hire people they don't want to work with. Okay, so honestly, to be truthful with you, if there's one person who's applying who's 100% qualified and there's another person who's applying who's like 90% qualified, but the person who's 90% qualified is way nicer than the person who's 100% qualified, I would bet good money that the person who is 90% qualified and very friendly is the one who's going to get the job. And that needs to come across in all of your professional branding, all of your materials, that you seem to have a good head on your shoulders and that you are a fun person to work with or a nice person to work with. And that goes back to when you're talking to the companies, don't talk about me. Like, I want to work for Google because it would be such a great experience for me and I've always wanted to work. That's not a good professional look, right? Instead, here's what I have that I would bring with me to the job, okay? And that is all part of your professional brand, okay? In your unit, you're going to see a lot of things that you're required to do. I'm going to post more information for you as we go. But one of the first assignments is that you're going to have to post a job ad, okay? And you're going to post an ad that you're going to shape your materials for this unit. So I want to make sure you're not just using an old resume you had. I want to make sure that you are understanding how you're shaping yourself for a very specific job or internship. So you guys are going to go ahead and find a job ad on Monster.com, Career Builders, on a specific company website, on a listserv that your professor gave you, whatever. But an advertisement for a job or an internship for which you will be qualified in the next year. Okay, so do not apply for things that say you have to already have a master's degree when you're not even done with your bachelor's degree, you know. Look at things that you will be able to apply for within the next year. So if you're a senior and you're going to have your degree in the next year and it says you have to have a degree, okay, fine, you can apply for it. But don't pick things way out of your range. You need to find one because you're going to post one on Wednesday to use for this unit, okay? Let me know if you have any questions and don't forget to take the quiz.